dusting her hands. Shiro scoffed as she looked at the pool of blood that coated the bed. Since it was only a few minutes for her compared to the year that Naisha had to experience, none of the guards had come to check up on her just yet. I should head back now, Shiro muttered as she waved her finger, retracting all of the needles spread around the room. Right now, she could only make 3 needles, and she had even received a skill for this. Divine runic needles. Needles carved with the runic language of the gods. Depending on your understanding, each needle will have its own effects. The potency of the needles also depends on enemy resistances and strength. Current needles. Paralytic needle, mana shredder needle, perception enhancement needle. Cost: 10% of mana for each needle. Not all of the needles were harmful, since the perception enhancement needle also works for her if she fine-tunes the perception of time a little. That way, there's more time to react to an attack during a fight. After killing Naisha, even if she was weakened, her level had increased with most of the EXP going to Nantian since he contributed the most. This raised her level only by 5 since she was level 760. Name: Shiro. Race: Spirit Demigod. Title: Expert Monster. 13-029/100-000 humans killed. Fratricide. Creator of the Frozen Hell series. Incomplete. Creator of Een-Style Azura's Path. Seeker of Truths. Revolutionary. Celestial Empress EX. Benevolent Saint EX. Error Code. Genocide. One of a kind. Virtue of Fortitude. Young Demigod. Goddess of Protection. Merciful Goddess. Young Goddess. 50% boost currently. Leader of Asharia. Tainted Shell. Realm Breaker. Level: 765. Class: Nanotech Demigoddess. Demigod. HP: 109. 375. 000. 000/109. 375. 000. 000. MP: 376. 250. 000. 000/376. 250. 000. 000. STR: 625 million. VIT: 710 million. INT: 2,150 million. AGI: 730 million. DEX: 605 million. DEF: 515,000. 000. Unassigned points: 0. Attunements: Cosmic Ice, Tier 6. Apocalyptic Lightning, Tier 6. Stygian Steel, Tier 6. Astral Rift, Tier 6. Augmented with Calamity's Will. Void Star, Tier 6. Celestial Star, Tier 6. Dark Celestial Phoenix Fire, Tier 6. Boreal Wind, Tier 6. Tectonic Quake, Tier 6. Oceanic Abyss, Tier 6. Nature, Tier 6. Tier: Nanotech, Tier 7 Demigod. Skills: Error, Extraction, Nanotech Demigoddess. Elemental Breath, Celestial Mirage, Force of Elements. Demigod Raiment, Tier 6 Element Magic. Rift Strider EX, Demigoddess Domain. Demigod Skill: Rebirth, Legendary Elemental Mastery, Spirit Assistance EX. Divine Court Appointment. Demigoddess Blessing, Shared Burden. Nanotech Engineering Tier 6. Analysis, True Spirit Nature. Divine Gardens, Divine Presence. Divinity of Nanobots, March of the Goddess. Divine Insight of God, Protection of the Goddess. Boon of the Demigoddess. Frozen Hell Series. Frozen Slumber, Azure Hell Fire, Borealis Lance, Frozen Chandelier. Ancient Healing Arts, Fire of Life, Grace, Path of Ascendance, Phantom Path, Celestial Path. Pandora's Requiem, Reaper, Limit Break, Origin, War Saint, Divine Enchantment. Current Blessings: Asteria, Athena, Aphrodite, Ares, Artemis, Hades, Hermes, Poseidon, Nyx. World-Class Magic, Requiem of the Dead. Grand Support Class Magic, Requiem of the Demigoddess. Other. Minimap: Inspection, Disguise, Combust, Heavenly Constellation, Aurora, Chimera Arts, Hollow Deceit, Hitoma, Divine Language, Wrath of Stars, Eyes of the Gorgon, Miracle. Sigil of Night, Encroaching Darkness, Skill Scholar, Item Master, Limit Focus, Blessing of Chaos, Soul Siphon, Divine Runic Needles. However, despite her monstrous stats, she knew that she was no match for gods just yet. Even if she is technically classified as a demigod, she knew that real ones were much stronger. Shaking her head, she glanced back at the safe house and saw the guards in a panic. They must have got the notification that their queen is dead. Well, it's not my problem anymore. Shiro thought to herself as she opened a portal and teleported back to the temple. Seeing that everyone was still here, treating Nantion's injuries, Shiro sighed in relief. She was a little worried about their safety, hence why she killed the queen quickly, otherwise she would have tortured her for a bit longer than just a few minutes. Seems like you're done with everything, Sylvia said as Shiro nodded her head. I have. There's going to be one less queen in the event, Shiro replied, walking next to Nantion. Sitting down next to him, she drank a mana potion and activated analysis to see if she could pinpoint the origin point of his backlash. After studying some of the runes, she had a rough idea of how to possibly treat the backlash, but she wasn't sure. It was a theory for now, so she wanted to see if it was possible. However, even after drawing some runes to see if she could spot his backlash, she saw nothing. Sylvia, you and the others can start reflecting on the knowledge you gained and perhaps help one another. If any of you can access the secondary trial somehow, it'll be beneficial for us, Shiro said as Sylvia nodded her head. Sure, we do have a few restrictions that we have to follow with this knowledge, but it doesn't restrict us from sharing with people that already know. Sylvia shrugged. As for the secondary trial, we don't have a clue just yet. That's fine. We'll use this place as a temporary base since Nantion's injured. We'll camp for a day, and once he's woken up, we'll make our way back to Asharia so that we can prepare for the event, Shiro said as Sylvia nodded. While Sylvia and the other healers were trading knowledge with one another, Shiro looked after Nantion. Sitting next to him, she couldn't help but sigh. I suppose this is what he felt when he was looking after me, Shiro thought to herself. ###HNG. Groaning softly, Nantion opened his eyes slowly as he saw Shiro reading a book above him. Noticing that he was resting his head on her leg right now while she was reading, he wanted to sit up when her finger pressed down on his head. Just rest. You've already overexerted yourself by almost killing a queen, Shiro said as she didn't look away from her book. Fine. This is a rather interesting situation, isn't it? Normally, it'll be the other way around. Nantion chuckled as Shiro shrugged. Well, who told you to stack berserk skills without a recovery passive like I do? Shiro rolled her eyes as she glanced down. What can I say? I can't exactly let them ambush you after all of you come out of that trial now, can I? Nantion smiled as Shiro flicked his head. True, but still. What do you think I would do if you died on me? Shiro sighed. Cause a massacre? Nantion joked as Shiro nodded her head. That, and I'll ask Hades to bring your soul back if I couldn't get to you in time. If you're not around, what do you think would happen to my trauma? Shiro glanced to the side while trying to focus back on her book once more. This might be asking too much, but do you mind if I enjoy this a little longer? Nantion asked with a small smile. Sure, you need some rest anyways. Don't do anything strange, or else I'll hit you. I wouldn't dare. Nantion chuckled, resting for a while. He wanted to get up once more, but Shiro pressed her finger against his head again. More rest, Shiro lectured since he had only laid down for a little while. I think you can spare enough time for me to go back to Asharia. Nantion forced a smile as Shiro narrowed her eyes. Drinking a mana potion, Shiro created a pink wheelchair next to them. This is, get in. Shiro smiled, as this was her revenge. But did I stutter? Shiro asked, pointing a gun at Nantion with a sweet smile. I shall gracefully accept this wheelchair. Nantion sighed, allowing him to stand up. Shiro watched as he sat down on the wheelchair, but the moment he did, a belt wrapped around his waist as Shiro snapped her finger a second time, revealing two chambers that released rainbow trails behind them. Shiro had the wheelchair follow her as she walked towards the rest of the group. Everyone pack up, we're going back to the city now, Shiro called out as they all turned around. But the moment they did, they froze up in shock seeing Nantion's wheelchair pumping out rainbow glitter to a beat. This is, Sylvia raised an eyebrow. A normal wheelchair. Is there a problem? Shiro smiled as Sylvia paused, but shook her head. She figured that it was probably her way of getting revenge for all of the wheelchairs that Nantion had given her. Nope, we're ready anytime. Sylvia smiled as Shiro nodded her head. Good, I'll open a portal no dash. Before she could even finish, she felt her mana realm stir as energy started to fill her body. Widening her eyes, she looked at Nantion and Sylvia. My mana realm finished evolving. Your mana realm has finished evolving. Both Sylvia and Nantion widened their eyes since this meant that not only will Shiro not need to bother with potions anymore, she would also be stronger than ever. After all, it was unprecedented for the mana realm to evolve, and it was literally unheard of. It can get enhancements that improve it little by little, but never a full-on evolution. To put it in simpler terms, it's like whacking an engine on a skateboard. Sure, it goes fast and it's enhanced, but it's still a skateboard, whereas the evolved mana realm could possibly be a supercar that dwarfs the skateboard. Yeah, I can feel the energy flowing through my body again. My passive skill is regenerating all of my mana back. My divine energy might need so. Wait. No, my divine energy is also replenishing. Shiro muttered in surprise. Divine energy was different compared to mana. She could only get a set amount every day, but right now, it was regenerating slowly. While it might not be fast enough to help her in combat, it was enough for her to cast 1 or 2 more divine spells per day. Are you able to access your mana realm? Nantian asked, but Shiro shook her head. Not yet, but I think it is similar to breaking open an egg. Once it's fully broken out of its shell, I'll be able to access it once more. Shiro nodded her head. While the three of them were talking about her mana realm, the others were surprised since it was the first time they had ever heard of a person's mana realm evolving. Some of them had the curiosity to examine Shiro, but they didn't dare ask. After all, if Sylvia wasn't taking the initiative, there was no room for them to ask. Well, regardless, let's head back first. I think this is a good enough time to let everyone else in Asharia know, Sylvia suggested as Shiro nodded her head. Turning around, she was about to prepare herself to activate the portal when the spell circle immediately formed on her wrist, and the portal was opened in an instant. Blinking her eyes in surprise, Shiro didn't expect her casting time to be so short, and neither did anyone else. A single blink was all it took for her to cast. There was little to no chance for any sort of interference. Did you just cast that instantly? Sylvia asked as Shiro nodded her head. I think so. The mana is flowing through my body much faster than before, so casting a spell is essentially on 2 times speed, I think. Shiro replied as she had the urge to test this out some more, but now wasn't the time. Gesturing for everyone to go through the portal, Shiro continued to make little trinkets to see how fast she could cast, and when combined with her casting speed using nanobots, there was little to no delay. With the speed at which her brain can come up with these blueprints, it seemed as though the weapon would just appear in an instant without construction. There were plenty of things that she might not know about her mana realm just yet, but the main ones that she noticed were faster mana regen, mana flow, casting time along with casting efficiency. For a spell that should take 10% of her mana, the needles, they were actually taking around 6 to 8% of her mana instead thanks to her regeneration. Waving her fingers, 5 needles appeared in between her fingers in an instant. When did you become a person who uses needles instead of a gun or a sword? Nantian asked as Shiro shrugged her shoulder. When I realized that it's easier to affect people with runes carved on a needle than it is with a sword. Of course, there are still benefits to a sword and a gun, but for people, needles are pretty handy. Shiro explained. True, against a large monster, a needle might have a hard time. Of course, I'm not saying that your needles are weak since you can probably throw them at the same speed of one of your bullets. Nantian shrugged. Indeed. I'll need to work on my needle techniques though. Trying to incorporate this during a fight might be a little annoying. Shiro sighed. Flicking her wrist, the 5 needles shot out of her hand as they pierced a nanotech target that Shiro had created. 2 of the needles hit the bullseye side by side, but the other 3 bounced off each other and landed on the floor. TCH. Clicking her tongue, Shiro flexed her fingers slightly as all of her needles returned to her hand since they are all under her control. However, just in case there was someone that could stop that, there were also thin, barely noticeable wires connecting the needles to her fingertips so that she could retract them at will. Once everyone had entered the portal, Shiro walked through as she was the last one here. The most up-to-date novels are published on lightnovel world.com. Glancing back at the crystal, she narrowed her eyes before mouthing the following words. Thanks for your help. Closing the portal behind her, she didn't notice the crystals flicker for a moment before falling back to silence once more. Standing in the plaza, Shiro did a quick head count before clapping her hands for their attention. As you know, you cannot share this information with anyone else, but you are able to discuss amongst yourselves to get a better understanding. I would like to appoint Sylvia as the leader for now, as she still has her duties as the leader of the Healers Guild. I hope that all of you can use the information you have gained to improve the medical practices in Asharia. Nathan, we will send you a message once we are ready to see if we can treat your brother. Shiro smiled as Nathan nodded his head. Now, if there is nothing else, you may all return to your homes. Since you have done well this trip, all of you should have a form on your account that asks you for a desired reward as the winners of the small event we held. Once you have answered that, we'll try to grant you your wish as soon as we can. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them. Hearing this, a woman fidgeted with her jacket before raising her hand. Will we be able to read a document about your evolving mana realm? She asked as Shiro shook her head. Unfortunately, no. We don't know the details of this happening, and it is a rather unique case. As much as I want to research this, we don't have much we could say due to the lack of understanding. Answering a few other minor questions, Shiro watched as everyone made their way back to their homes. Sighing in relief, Shiro walked back to the tower while Nantion followed her in his wheelchair, still releasing rainbow glitter that would disappear since it was nanobots. Realizing something, Shiro moved behind the wheelchair and pushed while grabbing onto Nantion's jacket by the shoulder. Cough. Don't mind me, Shiro said as it was rather awkward to hold his jacket while pushing the wheelchair. I won't. So what's the plan now? Nantion asked with a smile. We'll inform our party members about my recovery and see if any of them want to partake in any experiments to figure out what benefits this evolution has brought. There's a few days left, so I want to find out as much as I can. Plus, I'm curious if my current mana realm can sustain the creation of a Tier 8 magic circle. If it can, I'll be able to try out the new runes more often. Shiro replied with a smile. Well, considering the fact that you were close to succeeding before, you should have a higher chance now. While we're on the topic of runes, how was the library? Was it helpful? Nantion asked curiously since he wasn't able to enter. Yup, I was able to learn a lot from the library. I still need to fully digest the information and decipher a lot of it, but right now I have gathered pretty much all the pieces I need. Shiro smiled. I think if I studied hard for the last few days before the event, I should have the time stop ready by then. The most up-to-date novels are published on lightnovelworld.com. Hearing this, Nantion glanced up in surprise. You already know space magic, and now you're studying time magic. Next thing we know, you'll be studying pure creation. Nantion chuckled. Well, that is part of the process needed to become the creation goddess. I did promise my big sis after all. Even with everything that's happened, I won't forget. Shiro smiled. It was just unfortunate that she hasn't put much focus on her Frozen Hell series recently. If she was to combine it with her runes, the power will definitely increase. Bringing Nantion to her room again, she sent out a message to the other party members before closing her eyes. She wanted to enter her mana realm and see Adi, Nimue, and Azul once more. Entering the path that would have led her to the mana realm, Shiro looked around in both confusion and anticipation as she could recognize the main island that she was walking on when she first entered the mana realm. However, everything else was strangely empty. There were no attunement islands, no Nimue, Azul, or Adi. Even the strands that represented her mana links were completely gone. Furrowing her brows, she was about to call out when she felt a presence approach her from below. Looking down at the ground with a frown, Shiro could feel the presence come closer as she took a step back and readied herself. Suddenly, Shiro saw a dark shadow flash past the edge of the island before landing in front of her. Unfortunately, the shadow tripped over as Shiro saw who it was. It was a young man that looked like he was around his late teens. With bright red hair and a pair of ruby eyes, he sat up and pouted slightly before looking at Shiro with an excited smile. Mom, Atesh called out with a bright smile as he jumped over for a hug. Catching him, Shiro couldn't help but smile and pat his back. You've grown so big since the last I saw you. It's a bit of a shame that I couldn't watch you grow. Shiro chuckled as Atesh paused for a moment before taking a step back. Did you prefer me younger, Mom? Atesh asked, looking down at his body, but Shiro shook her head. Nope, this is fine. Young you was cute, but now my son is so handsome. Shiro chuckled, patting his head. Previously, she could pat his head with ease, but now she had to reach up slightly as Atesh had overtaken her in height. Sheesh. Couldn't even wait a single moment to see his mom. A voice called out with a soft chuckle as Shiro could see Nimue walking up with a soft smile. Her long blue hair seemed to float through the air as though it was water, and the slightest movement would cause it to wave around. Gravity doesn't seem to affect her hair as she gave Shiro a light wave. It's been a while, I'll be honest. This evolution took much longer than it should have. Not that I was expecting it, of course. I didn't even know it was possible, but here we are. Nimue chuckled. Where is Azul? Shiro asked, giving Nimue a hug. She's just down below, redecorating a little since this place is much bigger than what we expected. Nimue gestured behind her. Below, the most up-to-date novels are published on lightnovelworld.com. Yup, this is just a single floating island. The main body of land is beneath this island. Come, we'll show you. Nimue smiled as Atesh pulled on her hand eagerly. Despite looking like he was in his late teens, Shiro couldn't help but see Atesh as a small bunny that wanted to show her something amazing. Following the two to the edge of the island, Shiro glanced down and widened her eyes in shock. Beneath this island was a giant continent with a myriad of environments that matched her attunements. Towards the north was the volcanic mountains, followed by sections filled with nothing but lightning. Nanotech could be seen in the center of this new mana realm, as an energy tower could be seen, generating a golden energy that flowed through the land. Understanding that it was probably divine energy, Shiro could see the land shifting near the water area. Narrowing her eyes, she was able to spot Azul, who was in a similar state to Nimue. After evolving, we all got a notification. We didn't get divinity, but we were quite close. Nimue chuckled, raising her eyebrows. She inspected both Nimue and Atesh. Nimue, divine aspect of water. Atesh, divine aspect of fire. We've become something called divine aspects, and it's a state that's just short of becoming a demigod like you. Of course, we can also access very marginal amounts of divine energy with our respective elements, but I think the most benefit is the passives we bring now that our evolution is done. You might want to check your attunements. Nimue chuckled, taking her advice. Shiro glanced at her recent notification and saw a total of 4 notifications. Dark Celestial Phoenix Fire, Tier 6. Dash, Aspect of Fire, Tier 7. Oceanic Abyss, Tier 6. Dash, Aspect of Water, Tier 7. Nature, Tier 6. Dash, Aspect of Life, Tier 7. Passive gained. Aspect of Fire, Aspect of Water, Aspect of Life. All of her attunements linked to her contracted spirits had been upgraded to Tier 7, and she had gained passive skills linked to them. All of the skills were the same, but with the change of elements, however, they were outrageous in their own rights. Aspect of Fire, Water, Life. You are immune to fire, water, life-based spells below Tier 7. The mana used on these skills will only refill your mana and boost your spell power for a short period of time. It was a simple description, but this was enough to tell her how powerful it was. Now that she was immune to fire, water, and life-based skills below Tier 7, it meant that queens and empresses that use skills that are linked to these 3 elements will no longer have effect on her. Looking at this in speechlessness, Shiro didn't know how to react, as Nimue only chuckled. Want a table? She offered as Shiro shook her head. I think I'll be fine. Also, Estrella has been missing all of you since she wasn't able to enter the mana realm while it was being upgraded. I figured, even though we were undergoing upgrades, we could still see what was going on. I know you're making progress, but I still want to tell you to not blame yourself too harshly. There's still a chance that we can get her back. Nimue smiled as she hugged Shiro, surprised that they saw everything. Shiro closed her eyes and returned the hug. Amen. I'll try not to. But did you know that during the entire process, Addy was essentially glaring daggers at Nantion? He wanted to accompany you, but since he was restrained by his evolution, he couldn't do anything but watch. Well, at least he protected Mom and stayed by her side properly. Atesh glanced to the side as Shiro couldn't help but smile. Also, about that voice you heard with Kronos. We don't know exactly what happened, but it seemed like Error had a small reaction. However, after that event, there wasn't another peep out of him. Completely silent. There's a small part dedicated to Error, but there isn't much to be seen there. Just a single altar that has a tree created from circuits being grown. Nimue said as she pointed towards the far east. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro could faintly see the rest tree created from circuits that Nimue had mentioned just now. Regardless of who that voice belonged to, they called me Mother, which is quite a respectful address. I think we'll find out in the future, but right now it seems like the most likely candidate is Error. Shiro nodded her head. Mom, there's not much else to be seen in here. Aunt Azul is redecorating, so let's leave and let her do her thing. I want to see Big Sis Een and Big Sis Lisa, Atesh suggested as Shiro nodded her head. All right, you can come out more often now that you're grown up. I can't keep you in the mana realm forever now, can I? Shiro smiled, but Atesh shook his head. It's not bad in here. Aunt Azul and Granny Nimue look after me, and I can help you whenever you're in danger. Atesh smiled happily as Nimue felt like a vein was already about to burst. So courageous now that you're grown up, huh? Who the hell are you calling Granny? Azul is older than me, for God's sake, and if you're talking about skin and stress, blame that mother of yours. If I wasn't a spirit, I would have become bald from the stress she gives me. Nimue crossed her arms and complained as Atesh shrugged. Mom is innocent. Don't blame her just because you look old. Atesh replied, hiding behind Shiro, as Nimue felt like she was about to become the aspect of wrath rather than water. All right, stop bullying your auntie now. She's helped me a lot. Shiro laughed as Atesh smiled. Fine. Great aunt then. Come here, you little sh*t. Nimue gritted her teeth as Atesh ran away with Nimue chasing behind him. They seemed lively as ever. Izul floated over with a smile as Shiro nodded her head. Amen, they are. I missed you lot. Not hearing you in my mind becomes surprisingly boring. Shiro laughed as Izul shrugged. True. They weren't able to move around much when we were evolving, so this is months of practically zero movement. Izul chuckled. Well then, I have some good news. There's an event in a few days. I think it's a good time to have 3 almost demigods making an appearance, don't you think so? Shiro smiled. I would say that's a bit of an overkill, but why not? The sooner we end the new age, the faster everyone can enjoy something akin to peace, I suppose. Izul chuckled as Shiro nodded her head. Glancing back, she could see Nimue still chasing Addy as they were both much faster than the average adventurer. Addy, Nimue, we'll be heading out of the Mana realm now. Wanna come? Shiro called out as Atesh immediately did a sharp right turn and landed in front of Shiro. Sure, I want to see Big Sis again. Atesh nodded as Shiro patted his head. I'm sure they're also excited to see you too. Also, Mom, I'm not a kid anymore, so you don't need to call me by my nickname. Atesh smiled, but Shiro shook her head. Nope, my son is always a kid to me, Fufu. Of course, if you don't want me to call you Addy, I can also just call you darling. Shiro chuckled as Atesh thought about it for a moment, smiling. Fine, you can call me Addy. Mom should use darling for her wife or husband. Flicking his nose, Shiro rolled her eyes. Joking around for a little bit longer, Shiro opened a portal as all 3 spirits appeared in her room, while Nantian and Sylvia were waiting by the side. Oh my, when did Addy grow so big? Sylvia blinked her eyes in surprise. Evolution. It's a shame that I couldn't watch him grow slowly though. Shiro shrugged. That's just how spirits are. I'll go look for Estrella with Azul since we haven't seen each other for a while now. Nimue chuckled as Shiro nodded. Watching the two leave the room, Shiro turned back to Addy. What about you, Addy? I want to talk to Nantian alone for a bit. All right, just be careful since he is an injured patient. Shiro chuckled as Addy nodded his head. Pushing the wheelchair out, Addy looked at Nantian and leaned against the wall. I still don't like you. He frowned as Nantian scratched his head. But thank you for helping Mom. Me. Aunt Nimue and Aunt Azul had to watch her suffer inside the Mana realm without being able to do anything. If it wasn't for you, Mom might be in a worse state than she is now. Addy sighed. It's fine. She's been protecting us all this time, so it's only natural that I help her in her time of need. Nantian smiled as Addy nodded his head. I don't know if I can help Mom like you do since you saw that she couldn't stay away for more than 10 minutes without hallucinating. It was hard for her in the library. Even though we're here now, our presence might not have the same effect. So thank you. We'll have a truce. Addy said as Nantian chuckled. Did we even have a fight for a truce to be called, kid? Nantian asked as Addy paused for a moment and realized that to him it was just a baby being a baby. Clicking his tongue, he pouted for a moment before sighing. Well, there's a truce regardless. I'm going to go look for Big Sis Een and Big Sis Lisa. Addy turned away and left Nantian behind. Shaking his head with a humorous chuckle, Nantian moved his wheelchair back in the room and saw that Shiro was waiting with a smile. Seems like there's a truce between you and Addy now, Shiro said with a smirk as Nantian shrugged. Seems like it. You might want to rest up a bit more. Now that I have my mana back, I'm going to make a few adjustments to the cities so that even the secondary city can run with just 2 anchors. Shiro smiled as Nantian raised his eyebrow. Don't worry, I'll be back before 10 minutes is up. I know my limits. Do you now? Nantian asked with a smile. Well, I suppose that is debatable. Regardless, I'll be right back. After I make some adjustments, I want to test out more runes to my heart's content since I have my mana back. Amen, have fun. Nantian nodded as Shiro coughed. I still need a refresh though. Shiro scratched her cheek as she sat next to him and held his sleeve. Do you think we can treat your trauma if we defeat the Watchman? Nantian asked as Shiro shrugged. I don't know, but am I being a bother? Since I always have to grab onto you and everything. Shiro asked, as she knows that Nantian probably has things that he wants to do as well, but instead he's always been keeping her company so that she doesn't have a panic attack. You're not being a bother. I'm just happy that I can be helpful to you. Nantian chuckled as Shiro bit her lip and furrowed her brows. Isn't there anything you want to do then, since you've been staying by my side for a few months now? Shiro asked, feeling a little guilty. Well, there are a few things, but I've been dealing with them on the tablet. My main priority was you after all. Nantian chuckled as Shiro couldn't help but cough lightly. Well, look after yourself. I'll go sort out the second city, Shiro said as she left the room. Once she left the room, She quickly shook her head since she could feel her face heat up slightly. Opening a portal to the secondary city, she teleported straight to the anchor point. The main problem with the second city was that without the third anchor, the energy output had decreased by a lot, and the two anchors were having a hard time keeping up with the runes that she had recently studied. She had an idea on how to potentially fix this so that the second city could be running at the same output as before, but with two anchors. Activating her analysis skill, Shiro glanced at the two anchors before drawing a rune in the air in front of her. There were a total of 30 runes that she needed to draw for the anchor to increase its output, and even then, it was just a theory. Most of these runes are used for storing energy along with drawing more from the area around them. In addition to this, she had made it so that her teleport hall absorbs a little bit of mana from everyone that uses it. It's not to the point that people will notice since it adjusts itself with each person. With this, the runes will start filling up with mana, and it'll be able to offset some of the drain as emergency fuel. Of course, this can also be saved up to fire a powerful weapon. Drawing out the runes, Shiro couldn't help but smile at the feeling of using runes belonging to gods while her mana continued to regenerate. Thanks to the upgraded mana realm, she could keep going for hours without worry. Even a skill that would take 40% of her mana will be regenerated in mere moments. Clasping her hands together, a string of energy weaved itself together as Shiro created a magic array to keep everything secure. Continuing to add parts to the anchor, Shiro only took a step back after 5 minutes and saw the result. Right now, it looked like a single orb of pure white, but if one were to look carefully, they'll notice the densely packed magic arrays with 30 runes acting as the core of the formation. Each of the runes had their own purpose, and together they would power the secondary city to the same efficiency as Asharia. Snapping her fingers, she connected all of the power channels to the new core as energy started to flow through the city. Closing her eyes, she could sense the energy flowing to the rest of the city as she couldn't help but smile. Right, that's the first task done. I'll need to adjust the primary city, add more mechs, construction bays for the mech parts, more defensive weapons as well as barrier modules for the city, and power everything up like before. Shiro muttered as she opened another portal. Teleporting to the core of Asharia, Shiro proceeded to do the same. Since she had done the process once, she was a little more familiar with what she had to do, so it was much faster this time, only taking her 3 minutes to complete. Once she was finished upgrading the core, she massaged her eyes before teleporting to the military base so that she could add more parts. Seeing the specialized mechs now showing some signs of use, Shiro smiled since this meant that Sheena and the others were continuing to improve their control over the specialized mechs. Adding the new construction bays was as simple as waving a finger since her new mana realm allowed her to cast with better efficiency and control. Glancing into her mana realm, Shiro couldn't help but look towards the part that belonged to error and wonder about what had happened. What gifted me the power to see time strands? She thought to herself as another portal opened beside her. With only 1 minute left to her 10-minute limit, Shiro teleported back to her room. Teleporting back to her room, Shiro spotted Nantion still sitting on his wheelchair while reading a book. How did it go? He asked with a smile the moment he saw her come back. It went well. The runes managed to sync up pretty nicely, and the output is actually higher than before. If 3 cores were 100% output, right now it's working at 150% thanks to the runes. It managed to offset Isilia's missing anchor and even improve it some more. Shiro replied as Nantion nodded. That's good then. It means we can revert everything back to what it was and even add more offensive and protective measures. Yup, I've already added some more weapons enhanced with the new runes and more mechs. I'm working on improving a few blueprints in my mind, and I'll probably make the adjustments to the specialized mechs later today. If we can get everything up to date by the time the event starts, we should be able to sweep it without any problems. Shiro chuckled. It's a shame that I can't exactly participate in this state, though. Nantion sighed as he looked down at the wheelchair. It's fine. The fact that you fended off an attack by the queen and even made it easy for me to eliminate her was helpful in the long run. It's one less queen on the battlefield, and if she was sitting in the backlands summoning new units continuously, then it would be quite annoying to deal with her. Just take this time to rest properly, though I might need you to come with me since I won't be able to fight for long. Shiro shrugged as she sat down by the table. Pulling out her tablet, she tapped it a few times as holograms of the mechs started to appear around her. What do you think of this idea? I'm planning on reinforcing the mech's power core with a few runes so that they can also enter a berserk state like us. By doing so, I'll be forcing all of the components to work to their limit and maybe even break. But the benefits are most likely worth it. Shiro asked as Nantion thought for a moment. Perhaps you can make it so that it's always in a berserk state rather than entering it, so that the internals are pushed to the limit. He suggested, but Shiro shook her head. That's pretty much just a full-on upgrade. Unfortunately, to do so I'd have to redesign the blueprints completely to refit everything. That would take too long, so adding a berserk module would be the better option with the time frame we're given. Plus, I also want to test out some more runes so that I can potentially stop time when the event starts. Shiro replied as she waved her finger, and the mech in front of her disassembled into thousands of tiny components. Bringing up some stat sheets for their performances, Shiro started to add the berserk modules while looking at the upgrade this would bring when activating it. However, just as she looked at the overall stats, she sat up straight in realization. Hold up, she muttered as she immediately started to type away at her keyboard. Is something wrong? Nantion asked curiously. I wouldn't say that something is wrong, but rather if this is what I think it is, then it might be something great. Shiro smiled as simulations started to appear on the screen. While she could just simulate it in her mind, it was for Nantion's benefit since she didn't want to be distracted while calculating this. Seeing the mech appear on the screen, Nantion fell silent as he watched with curiosity. However, the next moment, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. Is that? Yup, that's a throne world. Shiro grinned as she noticed that with these parameters, it was similar to hers when she activated her own throne world. Therefore, it was potentially possible to craft one manually using some runes. However, it is only possible when they enter the berserk-like state since it barely reaches the minimum requirements once they do that. Otherwise, they don't have enough power to craft one. Though rather than a throne world, this is more just a fancy isolated space. A mini-domain. Shiro shrugged as it didn't give as many benefits as a proper throne world would. For example, even tens of these combined wouldn't be able to match up to a proper throne world, but for her army troops, this was a good start. Unfortunately, it can only be installed on the specialized units, and it requires just as much from the pilot as it would from the mech. If the pilot is untalented, no throne world. Shiro shrugged as Nantion placed his hand on his chin. In that case, are you able to refine the throne world some more so that the talented ones are more powerful? Quantity is important, but we can't forget about quality. Nantion asked as Shiro nodded her head. I can infuse a little bit of my own nanotech throne world in there. It just makes it so that they have an unlimited armory. Or at least that's what it would feel like. Shiro admitted. So do you want to focus on a few good throne world rather than, to put it crudely, mass-produced trash? Nantion asked as Shiro nodded her head. That's true. If they have even one person with a decent throne world, then not even the entire army armed with the basic one can stand up to them. With the time we have left, I'd say I can suit up 80% of the specialized unit with the manufactured throne world. They'll have to do some last-minute training to learn how to use it though. Shiro smiled. Then we should probably get a move on. I'll come with you so that you don't need to leave every 10 minutes. Nantion chuckled. Perfect. It's been a while since I trained the specialized units myself. Shiro grinned as she immediately started construction on both the berserk modules along with the throne world modules. Standing up, she wondered if she should change into something more appropriate for a demonic trainer. Say, what do you think about me wearing a military uniform with a large coat to get into the role and everything? Shiro joked as Nantion laughed. Perhaps, but I think you can probably stay with what you've always worn. True. Maybe I just put some light armor on so that I look a little more intimidating. Shiro muttered as she glanced down at her black dress. Swiping her fingers, silver armor appeared around her waist as her crest could be seen adorned on the side. Some small shoulder armor along with a red scarf that trailed behind her slightly. Shiro created a chest piece and 2 arm bracers. Something like this should be good. Shiro smiled as Nantion nodded his head, creating a sheath for Sylvanes. Shiro created a mirror and nodded her head. Now that I think of it, isn't this just cosplay? Shiro asked. Perhaps, though it's not exactly cosplay since you are in a role of power. Nantion replied. True. Well, this should be fine regardless. Shall we go? Shiro asked with a smile. Nodding his head, Nantion watched as Shiro opened a portal. Walking through the portal with Nantion, they found themselves in her office that she built in the military base. It overlooks the entire hangar, and they could see the soldiers looking at the cranes in confusion since they were taking apart the mechs and adding new stuff in them. Tapping the broadcasting mic, Shiro opened her mouth. Attention, all specialized pilots. I want you to report to my office in 5 minutes. Hearing Shiro's voice broadcasted through the hangar, Sheena and the other pilots looked up in surprise and saw Shiro standing in front of the window of her office. Not counting the last time she had appeared under a disguise, Sheena understood that this was her first proper appearance in the military after several months. She didn't count her public appearance for the event of going to Varish Lyre since it was for the healers and alchemists rather than the military. Regardless, now that she had made the announcement, Sheena wasn't going to question it. She was sure that Shiro would explain everything once they arrived at her office. Sitting in the office chair, Shiro watched as the specialized pilots entered one by one. There were a few recognizable faces such as Sheena, Orin, Akes, Celeste, and Glenn, while others were unfamiliar. Nantion had promoted those that he deemed worthy of the title, but it was time to put that to the test. As you can see behind me, there are upgrades being created for your mechs. As specialized pilots, each of your mechs are unique in that they match your proficiencies. Sheena is a good example as she uses ice and her mech specializes in control with some points in attack power. The new upgrades are a berserk mode, as well as a throne world. But before I let you in the upgraded mechs, we need a bit of training. Shiro smiled as the 5 familiar faces paled the moment they heard that they'll be training with her. What kind of training would it be? Sheena asked with a pale face. Oh, it's not much. I'm just going to be training you so that you can deploy the throne world properly, so that when the time comes, you won't be troubled. As all of you are still rather low-leveled, you don't know the feeling of a throne world. Therefore, I'll be letting you experience it. It might feel like a roller coaster, but it'll get better once you get used to the feeling. Shiro smiled as the training she had in mind was a little harsher than just a roller coaster, but she wasn't about to tell them. Seeing her smile, Sheena felt a chill down her spine as she figured that she should probably prepare herself for something much worse. You see, to construct a throne world, it needs small mastery of spatial isolation magic. That's how you trap people inside your domain. There's a little trick when it comes to spatial magic, so in order to let you sense that for yourself, I'll be letting you experience it firsthand. But rather than tell you what we're doing, we'll demonstrate it. Follow me. I'll show you what I mean when we go to the training hall. Shiro smiled as she stood up. Pushing Nantion, Shiro couldn't help but chuckle at the sight of them looking at Nantion's wheelchair in confusion. But none of them dared to say anything. Arriving at Training Hall 1, Shiro set Nantion to the side before looking towards the group of specialized pilots. There are 15 of you, so who wants to volunteer first? I'll be deploying the throne world using you as a conduit so that it is your throne world rather than mine. It's a little rough, but it won't take long. Shiro smiled. Naturally, she was lying about it being rough. It would probably feel like someone had just kicked you in the gut and threw you to space before dragging you back. Plus, the forceful deployment of a throne world that they haven't created yet was difficult, to put it lightly. If not for her improved understanding of runes, she wouldn't even try something like this. If there are no volunteers, I'll randomly pick one of you. Shiro smiled as the pilots slowly looked towards Sheena. Why are you lot looking at me? She asked, feeling as though a vein was about to burst from anger. Since Miss Sheena is ranked number 1 out of all of us, I'm sure you're more than happy to demonstrate your prowess. One of the pilots spoke up as Sheena widened her eyes. Seems like we have a volunteer now. Shiro chuckled as Sheena despaired. Seeing the smiling Shiro, she sighed before turning to the pilot that spoke up. Running her finger across her neck, she glared at him while walking towards Shiro meekly. Please be gentle, she begged as she wanted to cry on the inside. I'll try. Shiro winked. Snapping her fingers, a giant Tier 6 magic circle erupted beneath them as nanobots started to appear around them. Feeling as though hot lava was running through her body, Sheena wanted to cry out in pain, but Shiro only smiled and placed her finger on her lips. Just hold it in for now. Shiro smiled as she closed her eyes. Motes of light started to appear around Sheena as Shiro felt as though she was swimming through an ocean. Understanding that she was trying to link up to Sheena's true spirit nature in order to form a throne world, she waved her hand as several runes started to appear. Diving down the ocean, Shiro could sense a distant reservoir of power. Clasping her hands together, several chains appeared and reached down in an attempt to drag that power up. The moment her chains came into contact with the reservoir, ice traveled up the chains and froze the ocean in an instant. Bingo! Shiro smiled, waving her hand. The Tier 6 magic circle beneath them started to rotate as the runes started to correct themselves. The space around distorted as snowflakes started to fall. *KRSH. Suddenly, the sound of ice shattering rang out as their surroundings started to distort. The next thing they knew, they found themselves in the middle of a frozen forest with what seemed to be frozen beasts observing in the distance. Their glowing blue eyes stared at them unblinking as they felt a chill down their spine. Slowly, specters appeared from the ground as faint howls were heard. Seems like this is Sheena's throne world. It's incomplete, but this is what you'll be activating in the mech. By dragging your enemies into this world, you empower yourself while weakening them. Under most circumstances, you should be able to grasp victory once you drag them in due to the advantage you have, but you need to remember that it is not all-powerful. A competent adventurer who has experienced throne worlds before will know that they need to interrupt your casting since you are vulnerable during the initial cast. There are even some that can break through it forcefully. Shiro smiled as she snapped her finger, canceling the throne world. Shiro quickly caught Sheena, who was about to collapse. Remember that feeling. You can take a moment to rest, but I advise practicing now so that the feeling is fresh. The more familiar you are, the easier it'll become. Take this. This is a smaller version of the Throne World module that I've installed into your mech. Using this, you should be able to deploy a small throne world after some practice. Shiro smiled as Sheena nodded her head. Just one use, and she already felt exhausted since a throne world was something that should exceed her current capabilities. Taking the module, she glanced up to Shiro. Can I request permission to use mana potions to practice? Sheena asked as she knew that they were probably running low due to the new restrictions on mana potions. PFT haha, you don't need to ask for permission to use mana potions that you have earned yourself. Use them whenever you want. Shiro chuckled as she snapped her finger and healed her using life fire. Right then, now that Sheena has demonstrated what to expect, the rest of you need to do the same. Now come, don't be shy, I'll be gentle. Shiro grinned. Of course, if you decide to wait around, I can just do everyone at once. Though I can't promise that I'll be gentle this time. The moment she finished saying this, they all raised their hands, wanting to volunteer themselves so that they can get the gentle treatment. Seeing as how all of you are so excited for this, I can't let you down now, can I? Everyone gets to go at the same time. Shiro laughed as a giant Tier 6 formation expanded beneath everyone as Nantion watched by the side. Seeing Shiro laugh happily, he found it rather charming. One just needed to ignore the squadron of pilots screaming in the background from the pain. ####. Looking at the pilots all laying on the ground, Shiro couldn't help but chuckle. However, during the entire process, she wasn't able to create a throne world at all for Glenn. Even for Celeste, she had some semblance of a throne world, but there was nothing at all for Glenn. Everyone, you know what you have to do. Practice by yourself. Glenn, do you want a quick talk? Shiro asked as Glenn nodded his head. Walking over to Nantion, she gestured for Glenn to sit near them while she grabbed his sleeve. So what's on your mind? You seemed a little out of it. Shiro asked as Glenn sighed. Well, I can't use spells well, nor can I use this thing called Throne World. Is there something defective about me? Glenn asked as he glanced down at his hands. I have asked Miss Aram before, and she said it was something to do with my mana realm. High-level spells are too stressful for my mana realm, so it's always a struggle to cast it. And now I can't even use Throne Worlds. Glenn sighed as Shiro placed her hand on her chin. Then what if I give you something unique for your mech? It's a specialized mech after all. It should be tailored to you. Shiro offered with a smile. What would that be? He asked curiously. 2 skills. The first is something called the Takamikazuchi technique. It's equivalent to overcharging your body with lightning energy, which increases your speed and damage. I can incorporate it into your mech, but you need to learn how to use it yourself first. As for the second, I'll be training you to achieve your full domain with the sword. Shiro smiled. Using her new runes, she might be able to set up a room where he'll be able to train in an isolated space that acts somewhat like a dungeon, where 1 hour out here is 1 day within the room. But like our first training session, there's no backing out, and in fact, this is probably worse than the other one. Shiro warned as Glenn furrowed his brows. Taking a deep breath, he opened his mouth. I'll do it. Hearing this, Shiro grinned as she patted his shoulder. That's the spirit. Don't worry. You should at least have some proficiency in the Takamikazuchi technique by tomorrow. Shiro reassured. Wait by tomorrow? But there won't be enough time. Glenn frowned. That's what you think. Nantion, are you able to supervise everyone else? I'll be trying to make the training room for Glenn. Shiro asked as Nantion nodded his head. Yes, I can. It shouldn't be too hard since I have some experiences with Throne Worlds myself. Discussing their training plans with Nantion for a while, Glenn couldn't help but feel pity for them before remembering what he'll have to go through in a day. If she is going to make him learn a whole new technique in a few hours, he couldn't even begin to imagine how much training they would need to do. Once Shiro had told Nantian about the training plan, she excused herself for a bit so that she could make the room. Closing her eyes, she brought up the floor plan of all the training halls near her current locations. From the records, it seems like Training Hall 4 doesn't get much use since the other training halls are already big enough. I should be able to convert this one to a time chamber like the dungeon, Shiro thought to herself. She had the theories in her mind along with most of the runes necessary, but there was one last step that she had to do. She had to finish the magic circle that Kronos had taught her back when she visited him so that she could pause time in the way she had hoped. That way, there won't be any burden to her body despite the large mana consumption. Once she achieves this, she should be able to sustain the time chamber for a while. Teleporting to Training Hall 4, she sealed the doors so that no one could distract her while she was doing this. Taking a deep breath, this was going to be the first time she tried to complete the magic circle while in peak form. Of course, she still had her time limit, but she could push it out slightly to finish this magic circle. Snapping her eyes open, divine energy flared from her body as she slammed her hands down. Suddenly, golden runes started to draw themselves across the ground while magic formation appeared on the ceiling. Hundreds to thousands of magic circles interconnected with one another, forming a balance while divine runes served as the battery in order to power everything. First layer. With the first layer of the magic circle constructed, a faint crystalline blue coated the room, isolating it from the outside space. Removing her hand from the ground, she clasped both her hands together as mana weaved together in the enclosed space of her palm. Tiny strands fused and formed runes of their own before connecting to form the second circle. Narrowing her eyes with analysis activated, her scarlet pupils flickered for a moment before opening her hand, expanding the second magic circle and layered it next to the first. Following her motion, a third magic circle started to construct itself as Shiro furrowed her brows. She had completely mastered the deployment of the first two layers, but layers 3 to 8 were slight gambles. Even on her best day, she would say she only had a 20% chance of reaching the last layer. To make matters worse, she's had no success with decoding the last layer thus far. It was always close, but she lacked that final step. Countless runes flashed through her mind as golden patterns lit up on her arms. Pushing them out, both the third and fourth layers were crafted simultaneously. For more, Shiro thought to herself as she stomped down, creating several magic formations to help her with the crafting of the fifth, sixth, and seventh layer. Pivoting on her right foot, she drew her arm back in one fluid motion and bit her fingertip before drawing a circle in the air with her blood. Snapping her fingers, golden runes lit up on the blood as it started to expand, creating the fifth layer and recognizing her as the owner of this isolated space. With the fifth layer still hovering above her palm, she didn't rush to integrate it with the other layers just yet since it served as a base for the sixth and seventh layer. Continuing to draw out runes that matched the ever-changing magic circle, Shiro couldn't help but sigh in relief since the sixth layer was easier than expected. Most of the runes and combinations needed were ones that she were familiar with, so it could be created quickly. The problem was layer 7. Looking at the unfamiliar change in the magic circle, Shiro couldn't help but bite her lip in irritation. The process so far has been smooth with her being able to craft the initial 6 layers without trouble. This seemed to be the best attempt so far, so she wasn't about to let the 7th layer stop her. Running the simulations through her mind, a list of runes were immediately filtered out from her database of knowledge as she reached out with her right hand. Drawing out the runes, she could feel her heartbeat faster as the layer continued to glow, signifying that she was using the right runes. But just as she thought of this, her layer started to dull. **T, cursing out in her mind. She quickly checked which part was disharmonizing with the rest of the magic formation. However, the moment she saw it, she couldn't help but grit her teeth. A single change. There was one change in the 7th layer that rendered her past calculations useless. This should have been something that appears on the final layer. Why did it appear earlier? Now that it's come early, the previous calculations aren't able to sync up properly. Shiro thought as she tried to correct it, but the formation continued to lose power. Should I give up on this attempt? It's just unlucky. The moment she thought of this, she shook her head. No, I can't stop now. Break it down, analyze what it requires, filter out the runes I need, and answer the requirement. I'm this far in, I can't stop now, Shiro thought to herself. Unbeknownst to her, the runes in her eyes started to flicker with a soft light as she analyzed the 7th layer, surging her mana to stabilize the magic formation while she decoded the 7th layer. Shiro simulated countless solutions that might work in her mind. Runes combined, tested, then broke apart once they were unsuccessful. Going through the possible combinations, Shiro could feel herself getting a little lightheaded, but shook it off. Her hand continued to move as she tried to find hints within the magic formation. Widening her eyes, she felt her mana start to drain as faint strands of light started to flicker around her. Each strand had a different color than the ones she had seen in Chronos' chamber. These were of a vibrant green. A quick sweep of the room was all that she needed to imprint the image into her mind before her strands disappeared. Spotting the dark green strand coming from the destabilizing 7th layer, she tracked it back to the 1st layer and understood what she had been missing. The first 7 layers are supposed to form a loop rather than connect to the final layer. With 7 key points, it will form a loop that stabilizes the isolated space. The first 7 layers are completely detached, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that layers 1 to 7 belong to something entirely separate from layer 8. Curving her lips into a smile, Shiro slammed her hand down. *ping. Shattering all of the links connecting each layer to one another, Shiro reformed them within her hand as a single strand connected all 7 layers together, harmonizing into a magic circle that glowed with a brilliant turquoise color. Seeing the runes present in the core of this magic circle, Shiro understood what it was. It was a key. The first 7 layers formed the key needed to decode the 8th layer and imprint itself into reality. Once proficient enough, one would be able to create the first 7 layers with a single snap, thus making the process seem effortless. Expanding the key above her, Shiro smiled and opened her mouth. The most up-to-date novels are published on lightnovelworld.com. Tier 8 Origin Magic, Chamber of Time. With the key in the center, the final magic circle started to reveal itself. A golden layer of energy composed entirely of runes used by the gods. Letting go of her control over the magic circle, Shiro watched as the key synchronized with the 8th layer as 2 notifications appeared in front of her. The first was the system congratulations. Congratulations, Entity, Shiro has succeeded in casting a god-class spell. As you are the first to achieve this in the new age, you will be awarded a unique item. However, the Council of Administrators are currently discussing your reward. Please stand by. As for the second, it was rather simple, but it brought a smile to her face. The gods backing you applaud your success. Gaia and Chronos cheers for you. With the time chamber now complete, Shiro glanced at how much it drained her mana and couldn't help but widen her eyes. Even with her new mana realm and monstrous regeneration, she estimated that she couldn't even keep this room up for more than 5 minutes, and that was pushing it. The realistic guess would be around 2 to 3 minutes outside this room. Looking at the magic circle, Shiro saw that she could turn this off whenever she wanted, but turning it back on would require her to recreate the magic circle since everything will need to sync up again. Drinking a mana potion to keep this running, Shiro quickly teleported back to Training Hall 1. You're back. Considering the spike in mana that I felt, you were successful. Nantion smiled as Shiro nodded her head. Yup, though it's a bit hard to sustain the room. It's draining my mana at a rate that I'll be empty in 3 minutes or so. I'll be drinking quite a few potions today. Shiro shrugged. Well, I suppose it is a tier 8 magic, something that should belong to the gods. It's something designed to work with divine energy rather than mana, so the fact that you can even sustain this for 3 minutes is crazy. Nantion laughed while Glenn was confused about their conversation. Anyways, I'll need to teleport out once in a while to. I hope you don't mind considering the time dilation, so I might actually just be teleporting here every second. Shiro scratched her cheeks. That's fine. Nantion smiled. Be back soon, I suppose. Shiro chuckled before turning to Glenn. Come on, we're going to train now. We're going to a chamber that acts like a dungeon. 1 hour out here is a day in there. With how long we have left until the event, even if we arrive a little late, I'd say we have around 15 to 20 days at most. Shiro explained as she grabbed his shoulder. Wait, I thought it was just a few hours. Why 15 to 20 days? Glenn asked as Shiro smiled. Time magic that I learned from Chronos, the primordial god of time. Hearing this, Glenn paled since he realized his big mistake. If the chamber makes it so that each hour is a day, that means that he needs to prepare himself for 15 to 20 days of pure training. Perhaps Zero sleep with her fire being able to get rid of physical fatigue. Before he could even cry out for help, both of them teleported away as Nantian chuckled. Right then, what to do? Nantian smiled as he narrowed his eyes on the rest of the pilots laying on the ground. Seeing that they seemed a little relaxed now that Shiro wasn't here, Nantian's lips curved into a smile. He had seen Shiro's training style a few times now. If these people thought that he'd go easy on them because Shiro wasn't here, they're dead wrong. She had high expectations for him, so naturally he'll meet that. Suddenly feeling a chill down her spine, Sheena snapped her head around as she saw Nantian smiling in his pink wheelchair. For some reason, she couldn't help but feel as though Shiro was beside him. Oh wait, she was. I'm here to recharge, Shiro called out with a sigh. Sitting next to Nantian, she held onto his sleeve while drinking another mana potion. Blurg, the more I drink this, the more disgusting it becomes. Even the slightly sweet taste is off-putting now that I've drank 5 back-to-back like this. Even when I was practicing with my runes, I didn't drink this many in such a short amount of time. Shiro complained as Nantian chuckled and patted her head. Thanks for that. As if my headache wasn't enough. Shiro pouted as Nantian paused and took his hand off. I'm only kidding. Anyways, I'll be back soon. Shiro sighed and sat up. Teleporting back to Training Hall 4, she continued the training. ####. The main part of the Takamikazuchi technique is that you'll run lightning-based energy through your body, emulating nerve impulses so that you can react to split-second changes while your body is moving at high speeds. Just because your speed is good doesn't mean you can put it to use if you can't react. So a large part of this technique is improving your reaction speed. That way, even without you moving at high speeds, you can still dodge most attacks if you're careful enough. This is what I want you to learn the most since it's the most beneficial within the mech, Shiro explained as Glenn nodded. Currently, he was sitting with his legs crossed and eyes closed. What little mana he had was pulsing through his body as a faint aura could be seen covering his body. However, Shiro couldn't help but frown since Aram was right. This is too little mana and the output is, to put it harshly, trash. With this kind of output, he would never be able to cast anything higher than a Tier 3 magic circle. And that was pushing it. The safe guess is Tier 2. Activating her analysis, she glanced at his links and placed her hand on her chin. With how his links are, I suppose I can try to refine them using the Boris Rebirth pill. I still have most of the ingredients, but never found much use for them. But there's also the problem of his man realm being weak. Even if the links are refined, his mana realm wouldn't be able to withstand the increased circulation. While mine was able to evolve, I don't know what spurred it to evolve, so I can't do anything with his mana realm. He might have to stay like this for the rest of his life. Shiro thought, I'll be honest, don't take this harshly, but frankly there's no way for me to improve your mana output. Your mana realm is the problem, Shiro admitted bluntly as Glenn furrowed his brows and stayed silent. However, I will say that I won't give up on you. The Takamikazuchi technique heavily focuses on your body and reaction instead of just raw energy output. If we can improve this technique, we can tailor it to suit you better. Just know that I won't give up on you, so you shouldn't give up either, okay? Plus, with how the system works, there are more than just mana. You know Nantian, his leveling can be different to ours. He can cultivate while I don't know how to. There are always paths that you can choose, and you don't need to strictly stay on the path of mana. Shiro smiled as Glenn opened his eyes and looked up at her. Really? Glenn asked with doubt in his voice. Yes. Despite the problem with your mana link and mana realm, you instead know how to use your body. There was a point where my main focus was also on the body and technique rather than power output. It was how I could contest against one of my enemies despite having most of my skills sealed. Did you know? Back then all I had was a single hand cannon, a few daggers, and maybe a staff that I had laying around while he had all of his skills to his disposal. Shiro explained with a smile since she had an idea in her mind. If Glenn couldn't use his mana due to his terrible mana output and unstable mana realm, she'll make him tools to be at his disposal. Weapons, exosuits, skills, and mechs. She'll help him find a place in this world where mana was so important. He decided to follow her so earnestly, so she wasn't about to abandon him. Now stand up. I'll help you master the first few stages of the technique before we work on that body control. Right now, I'd say you're around 60 to 70%. We're going to push that beyond the 90% threshold by the end of this. Shiro grinned as Glenn nodded his head nervously. For the next few days within the chamber, Shiro's training only got harsher the more he improved, pushing his limits, healing his wounded body, using mana to reinforce his body so that it could withstand harsher activities. Shiro continued to find ways to help him, continuing to drink through the mana potions to sustain this chamber. It was to the point that Shiro wanted to throw up, but kept going. Nantian was concerned, but seeing her determination to help Glenn, he didn't say anything and only supported her from the side whenever she needed him. 100th hour without sleep inside the chamber. Glenn felt exhausted, but his gaze was sharp. Holding a nanotech sword in his hand that Shiro had created, he took a deep breath as a single flicker of lightning appeared on his body. Asterisk bang. Exploding forward with impressive momentum, he struck towards the dummy and cleaved it in half. Close. Remember, there's no need to release the lightning energy stored within your body to the outside world. Even though it's lightning-based, the energy is better kept inside your body. Use the flash of your sword to act as the lightning rather than your mana. Your mana is the fuel to keep you going. Shiro lectured as Glenn nodded his head. He was mentally exhausted to the point where he didn't even want to say anything, but his body felt better than ever. With life fire constantly relieving his fatigue and soreness, he felt like he was in a trance. Each step felt clear, and a path revealed itself. The sound seemed to fade from his ears, as all he could hear was his own breathing through his body. Breath in, breath out. Taking a step forward on the path that was shown to him, he felt his body fall forward. A gentle descent as his perception of his surroundings seemed to slow down. He could see the sweat drip down from his face to the sword before being split in half. Eventually, landing on the floor. A single instant, a tiny droplet of sweat exploded apart as water covered the area. His eyes focused. Adjusting his center of gravity, he took the second step towards the dummy. Slow. His motions seemed slow, but his speed continued to increase. Bringing his sword in front of him to act as both defense and offense, he closed his eyes and entrusted his body to his senses that he refined. The brushing of the wind, the arc of his sword. Appearing in front of the dummy, his eyes opened once more. Like a droplet, scatter and expand. Asterisk, bang. Flashing behind the dummy, sword slashes appeared all over its body as Shiro could see everything that happened with extreme clarity. That first taste of reaching beyond the 80% threshold in body control made one feel like they were at the height of their performance. An epiphany. Ideas would enter one's mind as this was how many techniques were formed, just like what Glenn had demonstrated. It was a technique he had created at the height of his focus, but that was not what they were going after. They were going after the threshold of 90%, the state where every moment was the peak of their performance. The flash of inspiration becomes a constant. Every movement is refined and technique after technique are sewn together into fluid movements, eventually hiding themselves in mundane actions. Right now, she had to stop Glenn from focusing on the technique he had just created since more are going to come to his mind. What she needed him to do is disregard the bait and instead pursue a higher goal. Regardless, he still deserved praise. Well done. That was quite impressive. Shiro smiled as she crouched down next to him, offering him a tower. She watched as he shook his head. It wasn't impressive. It was too weak, too scattered. A bad technique. It's superficial and flashy. If I refine something like this, it's like cutting off my legs just because I ran a somewhat good time on a track. Glenn clenched his fist as his gaze was strong. Hearing this, Shiro grinned since he knew that the technique was a bait. There was no need for her to tell him to begin with. Indeed, you need to keep refining your body. Techniques will appear in your mind like a snap of a finger, but that's not what we're going for. However, you did good. You tasted the first feeling of surpassing 80% body control, and your average is around 75% right now. Don't charge towards that feeling you just felt since body control over 80% is never rigid. It's free-flowing, so you need to let your body guide you rather than forcing it on a set path. Shiro smiled as Glenn nodded his head. Taking the towel, he wiped his sweat away before stepping away from the dummy once more. However, just as he wanted to take a step forward, he found himself on the verge of collapsing. Seeing this, Shiro furrowed her brows. Get some sleep. That last performance and pushed you over the edge now. Plus, it's already been 4 days since you've last slept. Take this time to rest well, and we'll continue the training later. Shiro ordered as she snapped her fingers, creating a bed for Glenn as he nodded and face planted into the pillow, falling asleep almost immediately. Chuckling softly, Shiro teleported out of the chamber and appeared in Training Hall 1, where most of the pilots are currently trying to project their throne world. How is he? Nantian asked as she had been informing him of Glenn's performance every time she teleported here. It's going good. He's just broken past the 80% body control threshold. Even if it's in a single moment, it's impressive. The fact that he was able to accomplish this in just 100 hours is frankly worthy of jealousy. Shiro laughed as Nantion nodded. True. Even I needed to train my body for years before I even got a taste of the realm beyond 80%. Even now, I'm probably only around 85% since I started to focus on magic more. Nantion admitted with a smile. That's true. His deficiency in mana is offset by his talent with body control and the sword. His path will be hard since there are always things that magic can do which the sword can't, but I'll say this. If he continues and levels up, even if he can't use high-tier magic, he can still defeat most people and protect himself. Shiro smiled as she sat next to Nantion. Would you look at that? The world is somewhat fair in the end. Though looking at your accomplishments, that's still up to debate. I am known as the breaker of balance. Shiro replied with a shrug. Anaesthetic, Nantion corrected as Shiro coughed lightly. True, but I haven't got much chance to do it for a while now, though I still have a spike with Ikari's name on it. Shiro laughed. Talking for a little while, Shiro helped out with the training for the throne world since Glenn was resting right now. Out of everyone, it seemed like Sheena and Akes were the ones closest to succeeding, with Celeste not too hard behind in terms of progress. She would have wanted them to join the chamber and training room but that would hinder Glenn by a lot since it'll be too distracting for them. Plus, she wasn't sure what would happen if they opened a second isolated space, throne world, inside another isolated space, chamber of time, and she wasn't too keen to find out just yet. But seeing their progress, Shiro understood that there probably wasn't a need to do that in the first place. Gritting her teeth, the space distorted around Sheena as ice started to form. Her surroundings seemed to twist and turn, but she was unable to hold it for long before it snapped itself back into place. Panting heavily, Sheena fell back and sat on the ground while sweat dripped off her face. You seem to be having a bit of trouble. Shiro smiled as she approached Sheena. Your Highness. Sheena widened her eyes as she wanted to stand up, but Shiro shook her head. It's fine. You can just rest for now. Tell me, what are you having difficulties with? Shiro asked as Sheena scratched her head. Well, it's just that I tried to activate the throne world using the module you gave me, but it refused to appear. The steps I've taken should be accurate. Sheena sighed as Shiro thought about it for a moment and understood what was going wrong. You're trying to deploy the full throne world, aren't you? As you are right now, it is impossible. I have mentioned that your throne world was incomplete, and the only reason it looked complete when we demonstrated was due to my interference. For you, you're trying to imprint something onto reality, but you don't have the power. My tip for you is to nudge reality for now. Have it manifest parts of your throne world, but don't wrestle it into submission, since that will obviously fail. Just take it step by step for now. I'll give you a quick demonstration. Shiro smiled as she took a step back. Snapping her fingers, the space around her started to distort as an icy landscape started to form around her. However, it was not quite an isolated space. Try to achieve this for now. It's not quite a throne world, but it's the beginning of one. You still have your buffs in this stage. This is the first step, and once you have completed this, you'll be on track to form the isolated space using the module. Shiro smiled, dismissing the incomplete throne world as Sheena nodded her head. However, just as Shiro was walking back to Nantion, she noticed a pillar of fire erupting out from just outside the city. The fuck? Shiro couldn't help but mutter as she sensed both Addie's energy along with Yin's. Pardon me, but it seems like I might have to do a bit of parenting. Shiro forced a smile as Nantion couldn't help but chuckle. I'm sure they are just playing around, but just in case anyone gets dragged in, I suppose. Amen. I'll be back soon. Taking a step forward, Shiro activated 2 runes besides her as her gaze phased through the walls. Locking onto the 2 mana signals, a vision appeared in her view. She could see 2 people panicking slightly as a column of fire was blasting into the sky. Sensing the presence of what seemed to be a restrictive magic circle, Shiro guessed that Een wanted to keep things a secret, but it wasn't able to hold the strength of the fire. The moment she locked her gaze onto the 2, both of them looked towards her direction as Een paled. Grabbing onto Addie's arm, she opened her mouth and said a few things before opening a portal to the rift and dragged Addie along with her. Ho ho, seems like Een wants to play hide and seek, Shiro thought with a forced smile as she took another step forward. The moment she did, a portal snapped open in front of her as she was instantly teleported to the location of the fire. The 2 runes that she used were ones that gods would use to observe the world. The first allowed her true sight of the target as long as she locked onto their mana signal. This meant that even if they are invisible, she could see them. The only problem right now was that she couldn't control her presence when using this, so her targets would be able to know who was observing them. As for the second, it was an improved version of her teleport motes. Locking onto the mana signal using the first rune, the second would open a tunnel connecting the two together and allow her to transport to her target almost instantly. This essentially meant that it was now almost if not impossible to run away from her. Looking to her right, she narrowed her eyes at the pillar of fire that seemed to grow with each passing moment. Activating analysis, she understood that it was absorbing the ambient mana and fueling itself. Similar to nanobots, this flame was seeking ways to keep itself from extinguishing. Shiro wouldn't call it sentient, but it was definitely a danger if it appeared in the city. Since Adi has almost attained a demigod state, there were traces of divine energy within this column of fire, making it hard to extinguish using normal means. Plus, with the nature of Yin's fire, this was a rather powerful combination. Snapping her finger, a rune appeared in front of Shiro as she waved her finger, and the column was cancelled out in an instant. There was no need to use water or ice since she was quite experienced in canceling magic, but just as she was about to leave, she noticed a tiny spark that flared itself back into a pillar of flame that charged towards Shiro. Raising her eyebrow, Shiro clicked her tongue. Che. Annoying, this actually charges at the largest mana source. Shiro muttered in annoyance as she clasped her hands together. Activating analysis, she spotted the core of this spell. Suddenly, tiny nanotech needles appeared within the fire and stabbed towards the core. Each of the needles were reinforced using her celestial path, so naturally, their main purpose was cancellation. *ping. Shattering the core, the fire extinguished itself as Shiro double-checked to make sure it was extinguished properly. Once it was done, she nodded her head before turning towards where Een opened the portal. Closing her eyes, a rune hovered above her right eye as she opened it once more. Peering into the rift, a link was formed between her and Een. This was a rune that allowed her to peer into different dimensions that she had a connection to. In this case, the rift. However, she could use this for the spirit world. Seeing Een putting on a brave act in front of Adi, Shiro felt like a vein was about to burst. Smug little *T. She muttered with a forced smile. Reaching in front of her, Shiro gripped the air in front of her as two runes appeared on the back of her hands. Ripping open a direct path towards Een with space magic to help her, Shiro stepped into the rift and appeared directly behind Een. So like I said, we just hide from Mum for a bit, and it'll be fine. What's she gonna do? Widening her eyes, Een immediately shut her mouth as she could sense Shiro behind her, and she didn't feel peaceful at all. In fact, she would describe Shiro as being quite ticked off right now. Go on, finish that sentence of yours. I'm listening. Shiro narrowed her eyes with a smile. I seem to be having a case of short-term memory, dear mother of mine. It's just the darndest thing that I cannot remember what thought I just had in my mind a few seconds ago. After all, as your precious daughter, the jewel of your life, the honey in your jar, I would not lie to you, dearest mother. Just look at my adorable face. Does this seem like the face of a liar? These puffy cheeks and eyes that resemble the beautiful mother of mine. Een turned around as Shiro grabbed her by the head. For someone that wouldn't lie to me, you sure are spouting a lot of bullshit *T right now. Shiro forced a smile as a vein threatened to burst. Oh, I am simply shocked. The fact that you would even suggest the thought of me speaking, and I quote, bullshit *T, is simply absurd. I would like to correct this thought of yours immediately, dear mother of mine. What if I cook you the best meal you ever had? Surely that would change your mind. Een offered with a smile despite almost being lifted by the head. She had to admit, her grip is both strong but delicate. A strange feeling. It was almost as though her head was magnetized to her palm. You know, that's a good idea. We can grill some barbecue too using that column of fire you two created. It's surely the most efficient choice. Unfortunately, I had to douse those flames out since it would have damaged the city. But you can just make another one, can't you? Of course, dear mother. I will be happy to provide you with another column of fire, free of charge. What kind of barbecue would you like? I'm craving chicken now, and apparently, a fresh one appeared right in front of me. First of all, mother, I am appalled that you would even call me chicken. I am a proud phoenix after all. And second of all, I'm sure you'll be heartbroken if you lost an adorable daughter like me to your stomach. Blurg, drop the axe, smartass. What happened? Shiro rolled her eyes as Een stuck out her tongue. Well, you see, Diadash, if you say dear mother of mine in that voice again, I'll fry you. Shiro warned as flames flickered beside her. You know flames don't hurt me, but fine. Een grinned as Shiro flicked her head. Ouch. Fine, fine. I'll be serious. I was just curious what would happen when two devour-type flames met. I figured that one would just be extinguished, but nope. The two fused and became something we couldn't deal with. If anything, you should blame the flame. Een shrugged as the corner of Shiro's eye started to twitch from her annoyance. Sorry, Mom. I won't do it again. Addie spoke up from the side as Shiro couldn't help but feel as though her heart was going to melt. Seeing that apologetic face of his, she couldn't stay angry at Al. Seems like Addie's cute face trick still works. Een muttered, *Poochie, *sniff. Rubbing her head, Een felt like she was about to cry. Animal cruelty, she complained as Shiro rolled her eyes. Would you rather be an animal or my daughter? Shiro asked as Een dropped her act and stuck out her tongue. At least Addie doesn't cause me to have a heart attack from anger. Patting Addie's head, she checked both of them to see if the fire harmed them at all. Since both of you are fine, I'll be going back now. Shiro sighed as she drank another mana potion. I thought Addie said your mana realm was fixed and all that. How come you're still using potions? Een asked curiously. Turns out that sustaining a tier 8 time chamber was no easy task. I have to take this every once in a while to keep it running since there's someone I'm training in there. Which poor B** starred chose your training? Een asked in surprise. One of the specialized pilots. Regardless, just be careful with your fire, okay? Addie's almost a tier 7, and your fire is special. It'll cause a lot of damage if it spreads. Shiro sighed as both Een and Addie nodded their heads. Talking for a little longer, Shiro made her way back to the training hall. She did offer Addie and Een to tag along, but the two of them wanted to explore a little more.